All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be doing a ranked showdown in the ACC. Number 16, Duke. Number 4, Florida State. Doak Campbell Stadium in Tallahassee. 7:30 p.m. on ABC, primetime television. 14-point favorites are the Noles. Total is set at 49. Look at this Duke offense. Riley Leonard, questionable with an ankle. That's going to be the biggest storyline heading into this weekend in this conference. And if he doesn't play, they're going to have a hard time winning this football game, Nick. Henry Bellin, the fourth, got the start against NC State. And this offense did exactly what they needed to do to win that specific ball game against a very tough defense. Jalen Calhoun goes 69 yards. That was a two-play 90-yard drive. They also had a pick that resulted in them getting set up at the 8-yard line. Next play, 8-yard passing touchdown from Bellin. They also had an 83-yard rush from Jordan Waters. They ended up scoring 24 points. They only had one drive, though. There was more than a couple plays. Scoring drive, rather. There was more than two plays. So they're able to get big plays from both sides of the ball to survive against NC State in a game. A lot of people were picking the Wolfpack. Bellin, though, 4 completions on 12 attempts. He had an interception on that first drive off a ball he just heaved up. The run game, 30 attempts for 194. Of course, 83 off of one play from Jordan Waters. This is not an ideal approach if Riley Leonard cannot play, Nick, because this guy, Bellin, he's going to have to throw the ball a lot more, or at least 30 times probably to go into Tallahassee and win. This offensive line, they're not all that great. They're not going to be able to really pave the way for a group of very talented backs, not just Waters, but Jaquez Moore as well, Coleman if he's healthy. If Riley Leonard does not play, Nick, the game plan here is going to be really tough. They're really going to have to rely on a lot of interceptions and a lot of fumbles maybe from their defense.
If Riley Leonard is not playing on Saturday, the defense is going to have to carry them in Tallahassee, which is certainly going to be a tough task. I didn't really see the whole smoke and mirrors behind NC State. I really figured that even without Leonard, Duke was going to win this game against NC State, and they came out and they did win. The defense stood strong and really stonewalled what was a pretty poor North Carolina State Wolfpack offense, giving up only 3 points throughout the game. You look at the Duke offense with Riley Leonard, it's a very balanced offense, 189 yards per game through the air, 198 yards per game on the ground. Obviously, that got moved up a little bit thanks to this past weekend's performance on the ground from Jordan Waters. I think with Bevan, they're certainly at a disadvantage. Bevan is not really built for this moment. Riley Leonard, prior to that, was having a pretty good season, right? 62% completion percentage, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, just under 950 yards passing so far this season. If Leonard can be healthy and play, that's a huge, big add for this team. Leonard adds so much on the ground and so much through the air. He really is that sort of dynamic piece. Although I don't think losing Leonard for this game necessarily the biggest blow. It won't kill them fully. I think they can still be competitive potentially on the ground if they can find new ways and get open looks. Waters is a fantastic back, 426 yards per game on the ground, 6.6 yards per carry, and 9 scores for him. Jaquez Moore, also a really solid back there in the backfield, 280, 5.3, and 2 scores this season. Without Leonard, it is certainly a massive disadvantage against a very good front seven from Florida State, a unit that is pretty good against the run so far this season. You want to have Riley Leonard healthy if you're a Duke fan, because with Bevan at the helm, it's going to be tough if he gets forced to throw.
Yeah, I don't think I like the supporting cast, but I don't think they have the quarterback at the helm to help uplift these guys. You're going to see a lot of underneath stuff, a lot of check downs, try to get him on the move as much as possible. Look at this receiving core. Jalen Calhoun's really stepped up after a complete blunder in week 1 against Clemson. 368, 24 recs, 2 touchdowns. Jordan Moore, converted quarterback, 25 grabs, 322 yards, 3 scores. Shamar Hagan's only 14 for 125. Nicky Dahlman at tight end has 9 receptions. So this isn't exactly a passing attack, even with Leonard that has great production, which was kind of expected this year. This is more of a balanced approach. A team that likes to grind down on their opponents really through the air and on the ground. I like the supporting cast overall at wide receiver and running back, but the depth certainly is not ideal, especially when you have a quarterback here that's going to have to rely on some guys like Moore and Calhoun, and if they're making mistakes, it's going to be tough. They really have to be able to help their quarterback out and make big plays. They're going to have to create big plays is what it is. And this offensive line, outside of left tackle Graham Barton, he hasn't had the greatest of years. He's having a pretty good season overall, though. Athlon Sports, I think a Duke supporter told me they were like top 20 in the preseason for the offensive line, and they were trying to tell us that, we were wrong when talking about this unit. And I just disagree. I don't see that one bit. I think the rest of this unit is, pretty much a liability. Jake Hornibrook's not been all that good at right tackle. Jacob Monk at guard. Scott Elliott at center. I mean, these are veterans here. They don't give up a lot of sacks. Certainly, with having more athletic quarterbacks, that's certainly going to be a given. But they're inconsistent when it comes to paving the way for the ground game. Give up a fair amount of pressures as well. Maurice McIntyre, another one of those veterans who is having, just one of those inconsistent type seasons, which we kind of figured from this offensive line. Figured with all the veteran presence, though, they'd be able to step it up a little bit. And they certainly have been an above average unit. But if they want to go against one of the nation's elite defensive lines, they're going to have to be much better in this game, and the consistency cannot waver one bit.
They certainly have to be a lot better on the offensive line if they want to have a chance in this game, considering that they're going to have to run the rock a whole lot here. This is not a bad wide receiving room, but when you have a quarterback that isn't experienced here in Bevins, who really hasn't played a whole lot of redshirt freshmen, he's going to be the guy that's throwing to them. I think it's definitely a disadvantage for Duke. This offensive line has disappointed. They're a big physical unit that has some veteran leadership, but I think they're being overhyped in some of the media here. It's going to be a tough matchup against a very talented Florida State front seven that just gets after the quarterback. They're home wreckers. They get in the backfield and they stop the run. It's going to be a tough matchup, certainly.
Looking at the Florida State offense, over 42 points per game, led by Heisman candidate Jordan Travis, 1,482 yards, 13 touchdowns, 1 pick, 4 rushing touchdowns as well. A big theme around the country is these better quarterbacks that can run the ball. They're really keeping them, conservative with their legs. They're going to wait till the big games to uncork them. I don't know if they'll have to use Travis's legs here going against a stout defense that we anticipate. They'll use them a little bit more. But Travis is another one of those guys, only $114 on the ground because they're trying to conserve his health for the remainder of this long season. Travis has been good, though. He's been accurate with the football. He's been a savvy playmaker. Hasn't been the most perfect player at times, especially against Clemson. Ended up having 289 in that one. Did have some inaccurate balls. Didn't look the greatest against Southern Miss. Kind of brings down his completion percentage. But he's been good the last 2 weeks. 284 against Syracuse. Virginia Tech, he had 75% comp rate in that one. The ground game really struggled against Clemson. Only 22 rushing yards, which I expected them to struggle. But that was just an embarrassment. 22 yards on 20 carries. 190 plus the last 2 weeks, though. So getting back to it on the ground here, Trey Benson, an explosive runner, is also very physical. 463 and 6 touchdowns. Lawrence Safai, over 7 yards per carry for him as well. This is a dynamic ground game for Florida State, only $177 per game. But they certainly have, really showcased how good this passing attack can be. Johnny Wilson, they're hoping to have him fully healthy for this one. 20 grabs, 357, 2 touchdowns. He's dynamic. He's had some trouble with drops, but he's a great downfield weapon with his ability to high point and stretch defenses with his long legs. Keon Coleman, he's been phenomenal this year. The Michigan State transfer, 418 and 7 touchdowns and 29 grabs. Far and away leads the team in all those categories. Jaheim Bell, Lawrence Defy's been a reliable pass catcher. They really haven't been dishing out the ball as much. The 4th and 5th leading pass catchers are running backs. So the 3 top guys, Coleman, Wilson, and Bell, they've been getting the bulk of the load here and not really showcasing as much as I thought they would in terms of depth. But that's just fine, Nick, because they have elite players here on this offense that can make a lot of plays, and that's what they've been doing all year long for each and one of these guys.
This is a very good offense that puts up a lot of points, a lot of yards. Jordan Travis obviously knew he was going to be a Heisman contender. He's looked phenomenal so far. Nearly 1,500 yards passing, 13 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Very good for him. Impressed with his numbers. When you look at the stats for this offense, the past couple results, right? 41 against Syracuse, 39 points against Virginia Tech, 31 points against Clemson, 31 against BC, 66 against Southern Miss. They put up a ton of points against LSU as well. So this team scores in bunches. They get the job done. 449 total yards offense per game, 272 through the air, and 177 on the ground as well. A very nice supporting cast of wide receivers that are all very talented. Keon Coleman obviously having that breakout year like we thought he would. The 7 touchdowns is an incredible number for him so far. Johnny Wilson, Jaheim Bell coming over from South Carolina, looking great at tight end with the 2 scores for him, 17 yards per catch for him. To Foley, Trey Benson, these guys are getting involved as well despite being running backs. Benson's having a pretty good season on the ground as well. This is a very high power offense. It's going against a pretty solid Duke defense. All things considered, they're giving up under 300 yards per game on offense. They're giving up 164 through the air. So Duke is certainly not a bad defense. They're a very good defense, actually. And this is something that possesses a challenge for Florida State as they've played some weaker defenses over the past couple of weeks. Syracuse, Virginia Tech, these aren't really great defenses. This is a big test at home against a very talented Blue Devils defense that gets after the quarterback and gets in the backfield.
I'd certainly like to see Florida State push that 200 yards per game mark on the ground. But regardless, they're highly efficient. They score touchdowns, and the passing attack is, again, much better than anticipated. Bless Harris at left tackle is going to be back for this game. He's been phenomenal in pass protection this season. They've had, Jeremiah Byers come over at right tackle. From UTEP hasn't been the greatest. He's really struggled a bit in his conversion here in this conference, especially in the Clemson game. Maurice Smith has really struggled this year, but he was great last week against Syracuse, looking to continue that momentum going for him. And this is an offensive line that's, certainly a lot better than in years past. There's a lot of mixed and match pieces here for this unit. I think getting Harris back, those are going to make things even better against the physical Duke front, Nick. Only 4 sacks allowed, and they certainly have been, not the greatest in terms of pass protection. I think this is certainly an above average unit in terms of what they've had in the past. This is, a part of the offense Mike Norvell's really tried to invest in, much like his skill positions. I think it's really paying off for Florida State this year. Jordan Travis, that is, he's been kept upright most of this season. Healthy quarterback is really going to lead the big dividends for this offense.
Certainly a good pass blocking unit here that's protecting Travis. Obviously, Travis can move on his feet and can make things happen on his with his legs, but it's better not to have to make him in that position. He's been comfortable in the pocket for most of the season, been able to pick out his targets. They stonewalled a pretty good front seven for LSU, a pretty good front seven as well for Clemson, and gave Jordan Travis opportunities to make plays in those games. I certainly think they'll have a good day against a very good Duke defensive line.
Yeah, Byers, he was getting whipped in that game, though, against Clemson. They certainly had some struggles in that one. They only ended the day with 2 sacks, and then, the rest of the unit was pretty good, and it allowed him, Travis, to make plays downfield. So very impressive effort there. Look at this Duke defense, 9.8 points per game. The work that, Mike Elko's done on this side of the ball is just amazing. And, of course, the quality of opponent's not great. They played Lafayette, Northwestern, and UConn. They just played NC State. But you still got to go out there and compete. And, much like the Oklahoma Sooners, for example, even if they're giving up some yards and some points, you can clearly tell they're a different unit they were a season ago. And same goes for Duke. They've continued these improvements as we expected, it's second year for a lot of these guys in this 4-2-5. And it starts with what they can do up front. Against Clemson, they started to get grinded down on in the second half against the run. That's why I thought Notre Dame would be able to win that game, and they did. But that's not why. They only had 159 rushing. Estime ended up having that rushing touchdown right there at the end, and that was really it. They didn't surrender much on the ground one bit. This is a very good defensive line for Duke, led by Dwayne Carter, R.J. Oben as well. Anias Pebbles, he's been really good up front, so they're starting to get some different guys involved. Aaron Hall as well. This is a phenomenal part of this team. They've had a knack for forcing fumbles over the last couple of years. They're certainly getting into the backfield at a pretty solid rate as well. 6 tackles for loss per contest. 14 sacks, mainly coming from the interior. But this is a veteran unit. I think this is a very impressive team up front. Of course, they don't have outside Dwayne Carter talent that's going to scream NFL potential, kind of a lot of average Joes for the casual CFB fan. But these guys can play football, Nick, and they can really limit the run game.
This is certainly a good unit that has some nice production from these guys. Dwayne Carter's obviously your bigger high-end talent here in terms of pure raw talent. 18 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss this season. Jamani Franklin, 1 tackle for loss, 1 sack, 9 total tackles. Oben, 8 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. Nelson Jr. has 7 tackles and 2 tackles for loss. So they're not putting incredible numbers up in terms of raw tackles. Trey Freeman as well at linebacker is a very talented linebacker, leading the team in tackles, 49 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, half a sack and a pick for him. These are some physical guys that get in the backfield. They got some nice numbers in terms of sacks. They're able to get back there and make the quarterback uncomfortable, which I certainly think is a key to success. Is can you make Jordan Travis uncomfortable in this game and force him to run and use his feet? I think that'd be a huge benefit for this team if they want to be able to compete here. Anias Peebles as well as having a good season, the senior. He's a big physical guy that has a ton of tackles for loss, 5.5 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks for him. Overall, I'm very impressed with this Duke defensive line. I'm impressed with this Duke front seven as they're able to continue to cause quarterbacks some trouble and stuff the run as well. They have good numbers against the run this season, 133 allowed per game on the ground.
Yeah, the linebacking core was certainly one of my biggest worries for this football team. Dorian Masai's having a much better season. Like you said, Trey Freeman's been a big playmaker for them. Middle of that 4-2-5 right there. Most impressive part about this football team, third nationally in terms of 30-plus yard plays allowed. They don't give up much one bit in terms of explosiveness, and that's what Florida State's going to have to do is explosive pass plays downfield. But I think the secondary is certainly going to have something to say about that. This is a unit that I was very happy with coming into the year. I thought they'd have a big season, but they've even been better than I expected, at least in how these guys are performing, especially transfer Miles Jones. He's been terrific in coverage for them. Joshua Pickett's having a very sound season. Chandler Rivers, he's been probably the most impressive out of all of them. And, that includes Brandon Johnson at safety. He's kind of their nickel guy. He can get into the backfield. He can play in coverage. A slot weapon there for them in the secondary. Then Al Blade's another transfer having a pretty admirable year as well. I mean, this is a unit that clearly has gelled well together. Most of these guys, that's their second year together under Mike Elko. And they're not giving up much through the air. 5 picks compared to 3 touchdowns allowed. They allowed 222 to Notre Dame, but they held them to a 48% completion rate. Clemson in the opener had 209. Obviously, again, they've played some bad offenses, so we're not going to read off those numbers. And they haven't really faced much of a passing attack this year. This is going to be their biggest test yet by far, Nick. How do you anticipate Duke performing here in this one?
This is certainly a tough passing attack that this team has to face. They've been really good against the air so far, 164 allowed per game. They played Notre Dame with Sam Hartman, who didn't have the greatest game through the air, so certainly that was something to look at positively on. But this is a unit that's going to face some tough opposition here with this Florida State team. Chandler Rivers is a big guy, and at cornerback, who's a really talented piece so far at right cornerback, the young sophomore, having a good season, 29 total tackles, 3 pass breakups, and a tackle for loss for him. I'm pretty happy with what I've seen of him. Jalen Stinson has strong safeties, having a decent season as well. 37 total tackles, 4 pass breakups. This unit has been good at keeping the ball in front of them and limiting those big plays. Florida State obviously wants to exploit that and make those big plays, considering all the weapons they have at wide receiver. That's a huge matchup to watch, as can Duke limit the big explosive plays and keep Florida State behind the chains that can get themselves involved in the game, potentially keep this a close game late in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I mean, a completely different receiving core than what they've seen all year long. But all the guys we read off in the secondary, these guys are all playing very good. There doesn't appear to be a weak link one bit. They're fast, they're furious, they're aggressive. They do a very good job of getting in the passing windows. Just a very disciplined unit, which I expect from Mike Elko. That's what he was known for throughout his career as a defensive coordinator. Duke defense, a very splendid unit for them. Look at the Florida State defense. We talk about them having a phenomenal defensive line led by Jared Verse, and they certainly have had some of their issues when it comes to defending the run. They're giving up a big play or two against Virginia Tech. Allowed 200 plus in that one. 152 on the ground in Boston College. The volume for them kind of lowers those numbers in total. But they were kind of having their way. Thomas Castellanos was certainly doing better than expected on the ground. Same with Clemson. They were running right at him with some success. Ended up with about buck 46 in that game. So even when this run defense struggles, they're still a very tough out. A little over 4 yards per carry. They've allowed 8 touchdowns. Certainly not the Georgia Bulldog type numbers that we expected from them. This is still a very great unit. Has plenty of players, in terms of depth and production. Jarrett Verse, Joshua Farmer, Patrick Payton. 2 phenomenal edge rushers there in Verse and Payton. Farmer on the interior, one of the bigger players for them at 6'3", 311. They got them all over the place here on this side of the ball. Dennis Briggs really been stepping up. They've been doing a good job this year of rotating on this defensive line. They really unleashed these guys against LSU, though, Nick. This is something still fresh in my mind. Week 1 in that second half, they let them go. And, man, they were dominant. That includes Fabian Lovett, who's been an elite run stopper for them. This is a phenomenal defensive line going up against, again, a team that's not all that great on the offensive line. Braden Fiske, the Western Michigan transfer, another one of these names that's really just going to pop out at you. Great defensive line here for Florida State, one of the fresher units in the nation with immense talent. Seems like they're probably going to feast here at home at Doak Campbell against a pretty poor offensive line.
I think they certainly have an opportunity to dominate in this game. This is a big matchup potential for them to succeed. Joshua Farmer, 18 total tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks for him. Patrick Payton's having a really good season as well. Another talented piece coming off the edge. Payton, I'm really impressed with him because he's able to be involved as well in protection against the passing. He has 5 pass breakups, 16 total tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, and a sack for him. Fiske, 16 total tackles. Jared Verse, we haven't really seen him fully break out yet. 15 total tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. These are all very good numbers from these guys. These guys are very physical. They get in the backfield. They make the quarterback uncomfortable. If it's a backup quarterback and Belvin behind there, he's going to have a nightmare trying to go against these guys because they're going to just come after him from left, right, center, and it's going to make him really uncomfortable. If Florida State wants to absolutely dominate this game, they're going to have to rush very often and send as much pressure as possible to make the young quarterback uncomfortable.
Maybe I'm being a little bit too harsh on the Duke O-lines. They've been running the ball very well. That includes, 190 against Notre Dame. It's a very impressive front that they have seen before. So that's something that definitely needs to be noted. Kind of want to backtrack on that. K'Wan Deloach, Tatum Bethune, they've been really good at linebacker. DJ Lundy's also a big, heavy hitter for them in the middle of this defense. So they got a loaded front 7. As we talked about in the preseason, we've talked about every single week when we mention Florida State, whatever respective game they're playing. Plenty to go around there on that side. And looking at the secondary, they've also had some struggles when it comes to allowing big plays. Florida State, they certainly have had a knack for doing that compared to Duke, who has not been giving up much one bit. You expect guys like Shaheem Brown, Fentrell Cypress to really try to tee off in this game. Renardo Green. Now, there is some speed and some talented weapons in Moore and Calhoun. That's it, though. They should not be getting exposed downfield outside on the boundary. I think, Green's going to have a big day. Cypress as well. Middle of the field, though, safety, I think, is still probably the weakest link on this football team. Kevin Knowles, he's not been all that great for them. Maybe better in coverage than, as a tackler and a run defender, so certainly has some strengths. Shaheem Brown, though, he's having a phenomenal season. Outside of that, though, they can try to, get isolated matchups with these other safeties. That could lead to some success downfield for Duke if that's the, game plan they roll with.
That could certainly be a potential benefit for this Duke team. This Florida State team's not been as good against the pass as I hoped they would be this season. 221.5 yards allowed per game through the air. I was hoping that number would be a little bit less for this team. Frenchell Cypress has stepped in as a transfer, solid 21 total tackles, 4 pass breakups for him. Good numbers so far this season out of him. Hakeem Dent's another guy who I really like, who hasn't really quite broken out yet. 10 total tackles. I know he's only played in 4 games, had some injuries, battling things of that nature. Shaheem Brown, a guy you want to try and potentially target as well. You might want to target Ronaldo Green as well this weekend if you're a Duke fan. I think those guys are both 2 guys you can target. Green, 19 total tackles, 5 pass breakups for him this season. This is certainly a potential opportunity for Duke to win if Riley Leonard is at a quarterback where he can pick apart this secondary that has looked a little weak at times, potentially get the nice matchups they want down the field. But overall, I think this Florida State defense is just fantastic. We've been raving about them. I think they're a little disappointing compared to what we thought they'd be in the start of the season. They haven't really had to be super competitive as of late. The Syracuse game, the Virginia Tech game, the offense kind of pulled them out of that one. They looked good against Clemson, though. They got the turnovers. They got the touchdown off a turnover. They forced some turnovers late in the game to win that game against Clemson. That was a big turning point for that defense. They can certainly use some turnovers this weekend.
Yeah, 92nd in opposing total plays of 30-plus yards. That's certainly not a great mark. And, I mean, they've been good, though. I mean, they have good guys like Jerian Jones, Greedy Vance. They've been dynamic in the slot, and that's where they're going to look to hammer most. Those man coverage opportunities against anyone other than Shaheem Brown. Hakeem Dent, he has been not healthy, a little banged up when he's been on the field, though he's just really been a nightmare in coverage. So there's some opportunities here, I think, for Duke. It's really going to be hard, though, because, again, much like the front seven, there's plenty of names out here that are having good seasons, plenty of different guys they can throw at you. Versatility here is insane for Florida State. But like you said, though, they've certainly had some struggles. I keep harping on the big plays they allowed. Boston College was not a great game. They were supposed to win that one handily, and they were getting beat up, through the air on the ground. Same with Clemson. And, those 2 teams, they went on the road and they weren't all that great. Florida State coming back home certainly has been beneficial for them the last 2 weeks. It was kind of shocking to see, Clemson have as much success they did through the air. Same with Boston College as well. They allowed 280-plus passing and 140-plus rushing in both those games. So they've certainly showcased some weaknesses, but like the LSU game showcased you, that they can certainly step up to the moment against tough opposition. Looking at team comparisons, I think it's going to mainly be a sweep here for Florida State. Quarterback Jordan Travis, he's going to get the edge over Riley Leonard, ? You just don't know. But I do think that Travis is a great quarterback. He's going to get the edge there. The running back room as well for Florida State. Got to give Benson and Tafai the edge with their efficiency, even though Duke does have some nice backs. Wide receiver room as well is going to go to them. Offensive line, the pass protection, I think, has been stepped up immensely this season. Defensive line, it's one of the nation's best. I'd say it is the nation's best considering LSU's flat-out disappointing season. Middle of the defense, I got to give to them. Secondary goes to Duke. I just love what they've been able to do this season. Very happy with the matchup we have on tap for Saturday between them and that receiving core of Florida State. That's going to be the only nod for Elko's group.
I think this is a good way to look at it for these team comparisons. I think that is certainly a great unit that this Duke team has. That's the secondary defensive back unit is fantastic for Duke so far this season. Florida State's looked a little sloppy at times. I think across the board, Florida State does win a lot of these matchups. Florida State's just a better team on paper, but this is why you play the games. Anything can happen on any given Saturday, and Duke, if Riley Leonard's playing, could certainly have an opportunity to go in here and shock the Noles.
Final thoughts in the prediction, that one edge they have in the secondary, that might be all they need, Nick, against a good Florida State offense. If they can limit the big plays through the air, they can step up on third down. That might just be all they need for this defense to make enough plays to get their offense in good field position. Leonard has to play, though. That's going to be a key of the game. If he doesn't, it's just going to be hard for them to win. Can't just rely on them running the ball unless Bellin comes out here and just puts on a complete clinic, which, we've seen crazier in college football, right? For Florida State, just don't let this one get to your head. If Leonard's out, it just might seem like a cakewalk, but Elko's going to have these boys in tune. You got to respect your opponent. I think they certainly will. I'm going to go with a score of 34 to 14. I'm going to go with 17. I think Duke, if Leonard doesn't play, it's going to be tough for them to do anything, but if he does play, they're going to have great opportunities on third down. They're going to want to live in those third and short opportunities. His legs, his playmaking certainly going to be great in making this a much closer game. I just think Florida State, they're going to have too many opportunities on offense, and I think their defense as well is going to make some big plays that puts them behind the chains. Low-scoring contest for the most part, defensive affair. I think Florida State, though, this is a big opportunity for them to really showcase some of the doubters who have, not been happy with them the last couple of weeks, Joel Klatt being one of them. And he certainly has a bit of a point with the lack of substance from Florida State. Big opportunity here, though.
This is a big opportunity for Florida State. So I think they can get a huge win in conference play against a top 25 team at home. I'm also picking the Noles 35-20 is going to be my score. I think Duke will score some points late in the game to push close to that 14-point line, but I think Florida State ultimately barely covers here. I think they just have too much talent. If Riley Leonard's not playing, that puts Duke at a severe disadvantage on the road. I feel for Blue Devils fans because they lost Notre Dame. They probably should have won that game. Then Riley Leonard got hurt, and now they have to go travel to an intense environment at Doak Campbell Stadium, one of the most important games at this stadium in the last couple of years, last 10 years really. If you want to look at it, they haven't had a big game like this in a very long time there in Tallahassee. So I certainly expect the stadium to be rocking. It's going to be very loud in there all night long, going to pose a lot of trouble for Duke. I think Duke's going to find themselves in some serious trouble. They're going to struggle to run the ball, and that's going to be a huge advantage for Florida State. I like the Noles in this one. They control their own destiny. I've been saying it all year. They got to just keep winning. Just win, baby. They know the script down there in Tallahassee. If they keep winning, they'll find themselves in the college football playoff for the first time in the playoff era.
We have for today's episode. As always, Nick, appreciate you joining me. Very excited to see how the secondary does against this offense. One of the best matchups on tap for the weekend, regardless of the final score. We're going to learn a lot here about Florida State.
Very exciting matchup. Certainly a great top 25 matchup in the ACC.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.